Till 31st of July 25 and section 20 in Liber, secundus, second volume of the Red Book, entitled The Way of the Cross, coming after The Gift of Magic and before, spoilers, The Magician. So The Way of the Cross, just checking the image. Where did we get up to? It's okay here and footnote 249. Okay, 25th of February 1923 is the marginal note to the calligraphic volume. The transformation of black into white magic. Fascinating. Right. Anyway, that date is actually, I'm not sure what that date refers to. That's significantly later, right? So it might have been a later revision or edition, that image, but the date that we're working with is Jan 27, 1914. I saw the black serpent, the serpent of my way, as it wound itself upward around the wood of the cross. It crept into the body of the crucified and emerged again transformed from his mouth. It had become white. It wound itself around the head of the dead one like a diadem, and a light gleamed above his head, and the sun rose shining in the east. I stood and watched and was confused, and a great weight burdened my soul. But the white bird that sat on my shoulder spoke to me. Let it rain, let the wind blow, let the waters flow and the fire burn. Let each thing have its development. Let becoming have its day. And so this white bird that sat on his shoulder and speaking this, there's a footnote in Black Book 4. This is spoken by his soul. In this chapter and in Scrutinies, we find a shift in the attribution of some statements in the Black Books from the soul to the other characters. This textual revision marks an important psychological process of differentiating the characters, separating them out from one another, and disidentifying from them. Jung discussed this process in general in 1928, Relations Between the I and the Unconscious, Chapter 7. Quote, the technique for differentiation between the I and the figures of the unconscious. Oh, that's the section. Okay. Collected Work 7. In Black Book 6, the soul explains to Jung in 1916. Yes, this is the important part. If I am not conjoined through the uniting of the below and the above, I break down into three parts. The serpent, and in that or some other animal form I roam, living nature daimonically, arousing fear and longing. The human soul, living forever within you, and the celestial soul, such as dwelling with the gods, far from you and unknown to you, appearing in the form of a bird. That's from Appendix C in this present volume. And so the textual changes that Jung makes among the soul, the bird, the soul, the serpent, and the bird from the Black Books in this chapter and in Scrutinies can be seen to be the recognition and differentiation of the threefold nature of the soul. Jung's notion of the unity and multiplicity of the soul resembles Eckhart's. In Sermon 52, Eckhart wrote, this is Meister Eckhart, the soul with her higher powers touches eternity, which is God, while her lower powers, being in touch with time, make her subject to change and biased toward bodily things, which degrade her, according to Eckhart. In Sermon 85, he wrote, three things prevent the soul from uniting with God. The first is that she is too scattered, and that she is not unitary, for when the soul is inclined toward creatures, she is not unitary. The second is when she is involved with temporal things. The third is when she is turned toward the body, for then she cannot unite with God. Okay. And so she said, as the white bird, let it rain, let the wind blow, let the waters flow and the fire burn. Let each thing have its development, let becoming have its day. And now there is a series of commentaries numbered 2 through 8 or so, which the first of which goes, truly the way leads through the crucified. That means through him to whom it was no small thing to live his own life, and who was therefore raised to magnificence. He did not simply teach what was knowable and worth knowing, he lived it. It is unclear how great one's humility must be to take it upon oneself to live one's own life. The disgust of whoever wants to enter into his own life, can hardly be measured. Aversion will sicken him. He makes himself vomit. His bowels pain him, and his brain sinks into lassitude. He would rather devise any trick to help him escape, since nothing matches the torment of one's own way. It seems impossibly difficult, so difficult that nearly anything seems preferable to this torment. Not a few choose even to love people for fear of themselves. I believe, too, that some commit a crime to pick a quarrel with themselves. Therefore, I cling to everything that obstructs my way to myself. And now section numbered 3 starts with a footnote. The draft continues. Why, you ask, does man not want to reach himself? The raging prophet who preceded this time wrote a book about this and embellished it with a proud name. The book is about how and why man does not want to reach himself. Obviously, thus spoke Zarathustra, which is referenced an awful lot throughout. Okay. He who goes to himself climbs down. Pathetic and ridiculous forms appeared to the greatest prophet who came before this time, and these were the forms of his own essence. He did not accept them, but exorcised them before others. Ultimately, however, he was forced to celebrate the Last Supper with his own poverty. He was forced to celebrate a Last Supper with his own poverty and to accept these forms of his own essence out of compassion, which is precisely that acceptance of the lowest in us. That's the chapter, The Last Supper, in Thus Spake Zarathustra. But this enraged the mighty lion, who chased down the lost and restored it to the darkness of the depths. In the last chapter of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the sign when the higher men come to meet Zarathustra in his cave, quote, the lion started violently, suddenly turned away from Zarathustra, and leaped up to the cave, roaring fiercely. In 1926, Jung noted, the roaring of the Zarathustrian lion drove all the higher men who were clamoring for experience back again into the cavern of the unconscious. Hence, his life does not convince us of his teaching. Okay, so we were saying, but this enraged the mighty lion who chased down the lost and restored it to the darkness of the depths. And like all those with power, the one with the great name wanted to erupt from the womb of the mountain like the sun. Nietzsche's book ends with the lines, thus spoke Zarathustra and left his cave, glowing and strong, like a morning sun emerging from behind dark clouds. But what happened to him? His way led him before the crucified, and he began to rage. He raged against the man of mockery and pain because the power of his own essence forced him to follow precisely this way as Christ had done before us. Yet he loudly proclaimed his power and greatness. No one speaks louder of his power and greatness than he from whom the earth disappears under his feet. Ultimately, the lowest in him got to him, his incapacity, and this crucified his spirit, so that, as he himself had predicted, his soul died before his body. In Zarathustra's prologue, a tightrope walker falls from a rope. Zarathustra says to the injured tightrope walker, your soul will be dead even before your body, therefore fear nothing anymore. Jung argued this was prophetic of Nietzsche's own fate. Rather obviously. Okay, the section numbered 4, reading. No one rises above himself who has not turned his most dangerous weapon against himself. One who wants to rise above himself shall climb down and hoist himself onto himself and lug himself to the place of sacrifice. But what must happen to a man until he realizes that out of visible success, that he can grasp with his hands, leads him astray. But what must happen to a man until he realizes that out of visible success that he can grasp with his hands leads him astray? What suffering must be brought upon humanity until man gives up satisfying his longing for power over his fellow men and forever wanting others to be the same? How much blood must go on flowing until man opens his eyes and sees the way to his own path and himself as the enemy and becomes aware of his real success? You ought to be able to live with yourself, but not at your neighbor's expense. The herd animal is not his brother's parasite and pest. Man, you have even forgotten that you too are an animal. You actually still seem to believe that life is better elsewhere. Woe unto you if your neighbor also thinks so. But you may be sure that he does. Someone must begin to stop being childish. Someone must begin to stop being childish. Section numbered 5. Your craving satisfies itself in you. You can offer no more precious a sacrificial meal to your God than yourself. May your greed consume you. For this wearies and calms it, and you will sleep well and consider the sun of each day as a gift. If you devour other things and other people, your greed remains eternally dissatisfied, for it craves more, the most costly, it craves you. And thus you compel your desire to take your own way. You may ask others, provided that you need help and advice, but you should make demands on no one, neither desiring nor expecting anything from anyone except from yourself. For your craving satisfies itself only within you. You are afraid of burning in your own fire. May nothing prevent you from doing so, neither anyone else's sympathy nor your more dangerous sympathy with yourself, since you should live and die with yourself. And 6. When the flame of your greed consumes you, and nothing remains of you but ash, so nothing of you was steadfast. Yet the flame in which you consumed yourself has illuminated many. But if you flee from your fire full of fear, you scorch your fellow men, and the burning torment of your greed cannot die out, so long as you do not desire yourself. 7. The mouth utters the word, the sign, and the symbol. If the word is a sign, it means nothing. But if the word is a symbol, it means everything. When the way enters death, and we are surrounded by rot and horror, the way rises in the darkness and leaves the mouth as the saving symbol, the word. It leads the sun on high, for in the symbol there is the release of the bound human force struggling with darkness. Our freedom does not lie outside us, but within us. One can be bound outside, and yet one will still feel free, since one has burst inner bonds. One can certainly gain outer freedom through powerful actions, but one creates inner freedom only through the symbol. I was thinking of Viktor Frankl too. 8. The symbol is the word that goes out of the mouth, that one does not simply speak, but that rises out of the depths of the self as a word of power and great need, and places itself unexpectedly on the tongue. It is an astonishing and perhaps seemingly irrational word, but one recognizes it as a symbol since it is alien to the conscious mind. If one accepts the symbol, it is as if a door opens leading into a new room whose existence one previously did not know. But if one does not accept the symbol, it is as if one carelessly went past this door, and since this was the only door leading to the inner chambers, one must pass outside into the streets again, exposed to everything external. But the soul suffers great need, since outer freedom is of no use to it. Salvation is a long road that leads through many gates. These gates are symbols. Each new gate is at first invisible. Indeed, it seems at first that it must be created, for it exists only if one has dug up the spring's root, the symbol. To find the mandrake, one needs the black dog, since good and bad must always be united first if the symbol is to be created. The mandrake is a plant whose roots bear some resemblance to the human figure, hence they have been used in magical rites. According to legend, they shriek when they are pulled from the ground. In The Philosophical Tree, 1945, Jung noted that the magical mandrake, when tied to the tail of a black dog, shrieks when it is torn out of the earth. Obviously, also Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Seems that I didn't realize, hang on, no mandrakes were in Chamber of Secrets, and the black dog, the Grim, was in Prisoner of Azkaban. So I must withdraw my association. Anyway, fascinating stuff. He says, yes, to find the mandrake, one needs the black dog, since good and bad must always be united first if the symbol is to be created. The symbol can be neither thought up nor found, it becomes. Its becoming is like the becoming of human life in the womb. Pregnancy comes about through voluntary copulation. It goes on through willing attention. But if the depths have conceived, then the symbol grows out of itself and is born from the mind, as befits a god. But in the same way, a mother would like to throw herself on the child like a monster and devour it again. But in the same way, a mother would like to throw herself on the child like a monster and devour it again. In the morning, when the new sun rises, the word steps out of my mouth, but is murdered lovelessly, since I did not know that it was the Savior. The newborn child grows quickly, if I accept it, and immediately it becomes my charioteer. The word is the guide, the middle way, which easily oscillates like the needle on the scales. The word is the God that rises out of the waters each morning and proclaims the guiding law to the people. Outer laws and outer wisdom are eternally insufficient, since there is only one law and one wisdom, namely my daily law, my daily wisdom. The god renews himself each night. The god appears in multiple guises, for when he emerges, he has assumed some of the character of the night and the nightly waters in which he slumbered, and in which he struggled for renewal in the last hour of the night. Consequently, his appearance is twofold and ambiguous. Indeed, it even tears at the heart and the mind. On emerging, the god calls me toward the right and the left, his voice calling out to me from both sides. Yet the god wants neither the one nor the other. He wants the middle way, but the middle is the beginning of the long road. Man, however, can never see this beginning. He always sees only one and not the other, or the other and not the one, but never that which the one as well as the other encloses in itself. The point of origin is where the mind and the will stand still. It is a state of suspension that evokes my outrage, my defiance, and eventually my greatest fear. For I can see nothing anymore, and can no longer want anything. Or at least that is how it seems to me. The way is a highly peculiar standstill of everything that was previously movement. It is a blind waiting, a doubtful listening and groping. One is convinced that one will burst, but the resolution is born from precisely this tension, and it almost always appears where one did not expect it. Half a page. But what is the resolution? It is always something ancient, and precisely because of this, something new. For when something long, when something long since passed away comes back again in a changed world, it is new. To give birth to the ancient in a new time is creation. This is the creation of the new, and that redeems me. Salvation is the resolution of the task. The task is to give birth to the old in a new time. The soul of humanity is like the great wheel of the zodiac that rolls along the way. Everything that comes up in a constant movement from below to the heights was already there. There is no part of the wheel that does not come around again. Hence, everything that has been streams upward there, and what has been will be again. For these are all things in which the inborn properties, for these are all things which are the inborn properties of human nature. It belongs to the essence of forward movement that what was returns. The draft continues. Everything is forever the same and yet not, for the wheel rolls along on a long road. But the way leads through valleys and across mountains. The movement of the wheel and the eternal recurrence of its parts is essential to the carriage, but meaning lies in the way. Meaning is attained only through the wheel's constant revolution and forward movement. The recurrence of the past is inherent in forward movement. This can only baffle the ignorant person. Ignorance makes us resist the necessary recurrence of the same, or greed allows the wheel to toss us up and away in its upward movement, because we believe that we will ever rise again, because we believe that we will rise ever higher with this part of the wheel. But we will not rise higher, but deeper. Ultimately, we will be at the very bottom. Thus, praise stand still, since it shows you that you are not bound to the spokes like Ixion, but sit alongside the charioteer who will interpret the meaning of the way to you. In Greek mythology, Ixion was the son of Ares. He tried to seduce Hera, and Zeus punished him by binding him to a fiery wheel that rolled unceasingly. So we were saying, it belongs to the essence of forward movement that what was returns. And then that footnote, and then only the ignorant can marvel at this. Yet the meaning does not lie in the eternal recurrence of the same, but in the manner of its recurring creation at any given time. The notion that everything recurs is found in various traditions, such as Stoicism and Pythagoreanism, and features prominently in Nietzsche's work. It's the eternal return, myth of the eternal return. There's been much debate in Nietzsche's studies as to whether it should primarily be understood as an ethical imperative of life affirmation or as a cosmological doctrine. Anyway, it's also throughout Joseph Campbell, Eliade, to mention to Peterson. Yeah, I mean, Buddhism, Hinduism. Okay, it does go on a little more. The meaning lies in the manner and the direction of the recurring creation. But how do I create my charioteer? Or do I want to be my own charioteer? I can guide myself only with will and intention. But will and intention are simply part of myself. Consequently, they are insufficient to express my wholeness. Intention is what I can foresee, and willing is to want a for, intention is what I can foresee, and willing is to want a foreseen goal. But where do I find the goal? I take it from what is presently known to me. Thus, I set the present in place of the future. In this manner, though I cannot reach the future, I artificially produce a constant present. Everything that would like to break into this present strikes me as a disturbance, and I seek to drive it away so that my intention survives. Thus, I close off the progress of life. But how can I be my own charioteer without will and intention? Therefore, a wise man does not want to be a charioteer, for he knows that will and intention certainly attain goals, but disturb the becoming of the future. Futurity grows out of me. I do not create it, and yet I do, though not deliberately and willfully, but rather against will and intention. If I want to create the future, then I work against my future. And if I do not want to create it, once again, I do not take sufficient part in the creation of the future. And everything happens then according to unavoidable laws to which I fall victim. Sorry, futurity grows out of me. I do not create it, and yet I do, though not deliberately and willfully, but rather against will and intention. If I want to create the future, then I work against my future. And if I do not want to create it, once again, I do not take sufficient part in the creation of the future. And everything happens then according to unavoidable laws to which I fall victim. The ancients devised magic to compel fate. They needed it to determine outer fate. We need it to determine inner fate and to find the way that we are unable to conceive. For a long time, I considered what type of magic this would have to be. And in the end, I found nothing. I found nothing. In the end, I found nothing. Whoever cannot find it within himself should become an apprentice. And so I took myself off to a far country where a great magician lived, of whose reputation I had heard. That being the end of section, let me check, 20 in Liber secundus, second volume of the Red Book, entitled The Way of the Cross. And this stuff all about the will and intention have to do with this paradox of 3 and 4 that is addressed in Psychology and Alchemy and elsewhere that I've been getting into and making genuine progress on, I feel, in my series on psychological types. And it's this paradoxical notion where the will in the position of the 3, it's kind of this it's the spaciousness that holds the tension between the opposites. It's also the logos. It's also the emergent property, the third. It has a willing and intending quality, but the thing is that the will is simply a term which refers to this third, which is inseparably bound up with the fourth. And the thing is that this there are conscious and unconscious aspects or contributing forces to the will. And so this is why that it has this paradoxical quality of that one needs to consciously and willfully intend to create the future, but also to have this attitude of deference and humility and not charioteering one's own life, but simply allowing it to unfold through one, not artificially producing it. And getting this in just the right, there's a kind of right balance to strike here, where doing it in such a way can enable the process of 3 and 4, can enable the logos to be sort of optimally focused or directed in a certain way, that what has been regarded as unconscious can design for us. Oh, that's quite interesting. There's a way to this would be a way to allow for the emergence of complexity through us, rather than consciously designing complicated rather than complex systems. And so the idea would be to allow the unconscious forces to contribute actively to the designing process. The idea would be, again, this is about humbling the will and the intention to make oneself into an aperture. So to allow a kind of playful spontaneity that is also yes, to willfully hold the creative tension between opposites, such that the will doesn't direct everything, but simply holds the tension enough that playful spontaneity can come out of that creative tension in such a way that results in emergent properties, emergent synergies, emergent complexity that is not contrived or engineered. Yes, and we can see how this is directly connected with the process of black magic being turned into white magic. I won't comment more on that at the moment, simply to say that this logos and eros is a combination of form and essence, or form and life, um, form and emptiness, but where the emptiness is abundant and full, and the libido, it's the source of life, and it's this combination that makes the invocation of that deep energy safe, because it's when, by the directing power of magical speech in the logos. Again, this is talk about this using the Eastern analogies from chapter 5 of psychological types. It's about this directing and focusing of the force of life energy toward natural forms that can be inspired and enthused by this creative energy. And I think there's a key difference there between sort of possession by um, Molochian forces, by dark darker forces, and the allowing space within oneself to be for oneself to be inspired. That's in no way sufficient to tell the difference between this black and white magic about which Jung speaks, but he had a lot to say. I can't claim to have understood it right now because it's a lot, right? Anyway, I'm gonna leave this here. So, moving on.